Hey y'all, I made it out of the sunroom. So my husband's alarm didn't go off and I had texted him so he didn't see it because his alarm didn't go off. And so um, I ended up calling him and he rescued me from the sunroom. The funny thing slash kind of frightening thing was that I had just eaten. If you haven't seen my previous video for the like pre-appointment video, I'll put a link to that at the end of this one. But I had just eaten like close to 50 grams of sugar, which I was starting to feel it in my muscles. And so thank goodness I had my potassium packet with me in the room in case something happened. Of course, I didn't have water, I don't think, so I don't know if that would have worked. Anyways, it's good. My husband woke up, he came and got me out of there. So it was all good. A lot of fun and excitement going before this appointment. And let me just say, so I was given permission by Dr. Jerath. That's who I saw. Her name is spelled Jerath. She is a neurologist at AdventHealth in Orlando. So that's who I saw today, and she gave me permission to talk about this appointment today. So I'm going to share. And first of all, the building where the appointment is, fantastic view of Orlando, highly recommend. I actually went to school at UCF, so I'm a fan of Orlando to begin with, and that was a special treat to me. Going into the appointment, I was having like on and off kind of weakness. Like I said, I had a crap ton of sugar. I had 2 Pop-Tarts and 2 Rice Krispie treats before going into this appointment. During the actual appointment, I didn't really experience it as much. I think like just throughout the day, it's been more of like that kind of heaviness. Like if I'm sitting and then I get up, I feel it in my muscles and they're just like, I just don't feel well, basically. So I knew that I was gonna need like real food after that appointment. Like I said, I do not recommend that. That can cause major problems for some people. So don't take that as advice. That's just what I decided to do, for better or for worse. And there was no really guarantee. Like I know sometimes I will eat like a bunch of sugar and I don't experience it until like the next day, or like sometimes it's sudden, other times it's like delayed. It's really difficult to predict. So anyways, Dr. Jerath blew me away. She is super personable, so down to earth. Like I didn't get the vibe that I get sometimes from doctors where there's just like this huge gap in knowledge and that kind of thing. She was just so personable. And after like I explained my symptoms, I had brought if you saw my previous video, you'll know this. I brought like my comprehensive medical notes. I brought the resources that I had read from like Periodic Paralysis Association and Periodic Paralysis International, including like the brochure on pursuing a diagnosis of periodic paralysis, the Haribo potassium like chart. I brought all these things. I had videos on my phone, which I don't think I mentioned that in the other video, but that's another great thing that can really help doctors, is if you have videos on your phone of episodes. Granted, I only had video of like very like mild to moderate weakness, because it's really a lot of the times like I'm at home working when it happens, so it's hard for me to video record myself when I'm having weakness. So I guess those can be helpful depending, but doctors really value that, I have found. And other great feedback that I got from her was that like the notes that I had were really helpful, of like documenting all of the incidents like in my past, like in my childhood and growing up, and like more recently where I noticed that I had muscle weakness or symptoms. She said that was really helpful and that it was so organized. And so that was very great to hear, especially because that takes a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, like it's worth it to me, because I am a very visual person in a lot of ways, and so it helps me to have those notes in front of me during an appointment, and it helps me like keep track of everything in my brain, because it's just so easy to forget like in the moment. And to like, for me, I go down so many rabbit holes. If you have been listening to my videos, you know this. And sometimes I never get back to the main point of what I was going to say. I'm trying to work on that. But sometimes I just forget what I was going to talk about, or I like another topic gets brought up. And so then like the original subject is no longer the main subject. And so it just gets kind of crazy sometimes. But anyways, I found that having the notes was still very helpful. Like when the intake nurse was typing in like my diagnoses and like my family's diagnoses, that was especially helpful. Dr. Jerath was asking if I had like family members that had symptoms, and I had mentioned a couple of members, and she was interested in whether they might be willing to be genetically tested. I've been genetically tested and I didn't have any variants. That's part of why my diagnosis journey has been so complicated. But the great thing is that if like you have particular VUSs, then, which are variants of unknown significance, show up on your genetic test results. If you have family members that get genetically tested and then they come back with the same VUSs, it can help doctors and researchers narrow down which genes and variants may be connected with specific diseases. And so that can help inform further genetic testing for other people who, you know, get genetic testing for those conditions in the future. And yeah, so Dr. Jerath was super like empathetic, like about my whole journey. She was like, "Oh my gosh, you've been through so much." And like, I wasn't trying to like, what do you call that? I wasn't trying to get like sympathy or anything like that. I was just sharing like things that had come up along the way, and she was just so empathetic, and that was awesome. And she was like apologizing that like I hadn't had access to medical grade potassium up until this point. And like, of course that's not her fault. It's just, you know, the diagnosis journey is so crazy. And something interesting that I learned was, you know, I had previously asked doctors, and I know this is going to be a potentially, this could ruffle feathers for some doctors, so be advised. But I was told, like when I went to go see a POTS physician, I had asked if I could take like supplements of potassium, and I don't really like understand the difference between like potassium supplements and like medical grade potassium. That's still a little vague to me. But he had said that as long as I don't take an amount above the recommended daily value in supplements, then that would be okay. And the reason is because as long as you don't have a kidney issue, then theoretically your body is going to filter out the excess potassium from foods. So if you take the supplement up to the recommended daily value limit, and even if you still have food that has potassium in it, your body will filter out the amount from the food. But I think it might have a harder time filtering out excess potassium from supplements. Don't quote me on that, but that's my understanding of it. So I was super like relieved that she was going to prescribe the potassium. And because I mean, like, I've been using coconut water and low sodium V8 and these Kepi electrolyte powder mixes, which have all been great, but there comes a time where I just don't want a particular flavor anymore. I get sick of that particular flavor, and I want to be able to take something if I'm having an attack or to like prevent attacks. And that was something else also that Dr. Jerath brought up that I really appreciated. She was concerned about like developing weakness like long term. So she wanted to make sure that I'm taking potassium to like ward off like more severe attacks so that I don't have like perpetual weakness in the future. So I really appreciated that. And so yeah, I'm going to be starting at 20 MEQs, which is 20 like milliequivalents, I think, which I think is like 39 milligrams of potassium per 1 milliequivalent, I think is the conversion. And so anyways, I brought up how like this one POTS doctor had told me about like not going above the daily limit, and she was telling me how like she has patients that can take like 9 or 10 of these 20 milliequivalents a day. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was surprised by that. And I was looking it up, and that actually looks like it's not damaging to the body based on what I've seen online in research. Again, I'm not a doctor. Do not take this as medical advice. Please talk to your doctor about it before you embark on any kind of supplementing or medicating, even if it's supplements, because that can really mess with people, and especially potassium, that can mess with your heart. So please, please, please go see a doctor. Do not take this as prescriptive or advice in any way. That being said, I also got she is giving me a referral to a nephrologist, which I've been meaning to see as well. They also, I've heard that they often have a knowledge of periodic paralysis because they are more likely to see periodic paralysis patients, I guess, because you got to rule out like kidney issues in periodic paralysis, because if you have kidney issues, that can also cause like muscle weakness and similar symptoms to periodic paralysis. So there's no rush on that appointment, but that's out there for me to do. And then she also gave me a referral to a fertility specialist that actually specializes in neuromuscular, that like specializes in the neuromuscular area. Like they see neuromuscular patients. And I was very excited to hear about that because Dr. Jerath was asking about, you know, like whether me and my husband plan to have kids or not. And I was like, well, honestly, like I'm trying to figure out if I can manage these symptoms and, you know, be able to have kids and like that kind of thing. And she was like, absolutely, like there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. And, you know, I asked specifically, like, would this fertility specialist, like, are there any like OBGYNs that would know? And I think those are two different people, like a fertility specialist and a OBGYN. I think those might be two different people, but would they specifically know about periodic paralysis? Because in my mind, I'm thinking about like labor, delivery, like when I'm actually pregnant, what is that going to look like, that kind of thing. And she said she might not know like specifically about periodic paralysis, but she helps other neuromuscular patients. So I was like reassured by that, because it can be really difficult to find doctors that specialize in this stuff. And I just didn't even know that existed, like a fertility specialist that like specializes in neuromuscular patients. Like that's amazing. And such a relief to hear that it can get that specialized. So FYI, if you're in that situation where you need help, you know, getting information about being pregnant and that kind of thing, there are very specialized like fertility folks out there. So I find that encouraging. I still don't know, like that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna be like, whoa, let's go have a baby, but you know, good information to have. I think there's still a lot for my husband and I to consider, like still got Ehlers-Danlos, still got other like things that I deal with, migraines and that good stuff. So something to think about though. So I really appreciated that knowledge. Let me see, I wrote a bunch of notes from the appointment just to make sure that I hit on these things in case like they help people. One of the things that I just like, I was like geeking out, nerding out, whatever you want to call it, at the beginning of this appointment, because Dr. Jerath was talking to me about how She's involved in like discovering new gene mutations in periodic paralysis, and I was like, oh my god, because I love like learning the research, like that's where the meat's at, yo. And I get super excited about that stuff, and like because that affects us as patients, it affects your quality of life, and it's going to help so many people when they have like an understanding of the genetic mutation, and that'll help inform treatment in the future. I just get really excited about that. And not that I know like genetics by any stretch, but I just find it encouraging from that perspective. And also because like I don't have an identified variant. If this is, assuming this is periodic paralysis, I would be interested to find out like what mutation it is, you know? And another interesting thing was that like they have their own like there's certain periodic paralysis genetic testing that only has like a very small amount of genes that you're looking at, and her office tests like more of those genes to find other mutations that are not tested as often. So like had I gone in there having like that limited testing, then that would have been like an opportunity for me to pursue further genetic testing. So that was really cool to find out about. And also like the fact that they're willing to help like other family members who might be interested in getting tested. That's pretty awesome from a resource standpoint. Something else that I loved about this doctor is that she was telling me how she's like just blown away. Like she gets so many patients, and these are patients like across the United States. She even has like international patients that come to her because they haven't been able to get help with their symptoms, and they have been diagnosed with functional neurological disorder. And if you don't know what functional neurological disorder is, it's not the same as periodic paralysis, but the symptoms can be they can look very similar. That's a whole other story. I'll put a link to those two videos. I'll put a link to the first video in this, at the end of this video, so that you can learn more there. There's also a great channel on YouTube called FND Hope, where you can learn more about FND, but it's pretty common for FND patients to be misdiagnosed. It's also very common for periodic paralysis patients to be misdiagnosed. So they can also be confused with each other because the symptoms can present similarly. So anyway, she's getting all these patients that have been diagnosed with FND, and she was talking about like the importance of patients like really pushing, like if they think that they've been misdiagnosed, or just like how patients are so accepting of an FND diagnosis. And I think like part of the problem is like we as patients just don't have the knowledge base to understand like the criteria that the FND diagnosis is being based on. Like we might not necessarily look at those diagnostic criteria, or even know that we can look up the diagnostic criteria. And so we don't understand necessarily the rationale behind why doctors are diagnosing us with something in particular. I think because I've been in this diagnosis journey for so long, like I'm sensitive to that, but I know like if I didn't know about periodic paralysis before the FND diagnosis, I might have accepted FND as a diagnosis as well. And I might not be getting the help that I needed, you know? So it's very humbling and kind of scary to think about that, because there was such a series of events that led me to even learning about periodic paralysis, you know? So all that to say, like, do your research if you feel like you might be misdiagnosed, like, or if you're not having treatment that's effective for you and you think that, you know, if you're starting to think maybe I have a diagnosis that's not correct because the treatment for this diagnosis is not helping me, I really encourage you to like look into other possible conditions and do your research. There's a great website called NORD, N-O-R-D. It's a registry of rare diseases, and there's a lot of like rare disease resources out there. If you go on Google and look up rare diseases, there are registries out there where you can use your symptoms to look up different conditions, and that can be really helpful. I've also found like the support groups in Facebook to be really helpful. A lot of people, like when they're in their diagnosis journey, will, sorry about that, I'm in low power mode on my phone now, but they'll share, their experience with different diagnoses in the support groups, so that can be really helpful as well. But yeah, like she said, believe in yourself and trust yourself. If something seems off, investigate it and figure out why you're having those feelings, and because there's a reason, and it might be maybe you need more information, or maybe you have misinformation, but it can be really helpful to look into those gut feelings. So another thing, and this is not I am not getting paid to endorse Dr. Jerath in any way. I just want to highlight that fact. I just had a really great experience, and I think if you do think that you have periodic paralysis, she can be someone that's really great to see. So there are other specialists out there. If you check out the Periodic Paralysis Association website, they have a Find a Doctor page, I believe. And you can look it up that way. There's also, I want to say it was Medscape that lists doctors by specialty and rare diseases. So that may be worth looking into. So, but she is very involved with social media, which I think is fantastic. I think she has a great pulse on the patient experience and the challenges that patients face. She even she was encouraging me to I told her that I was doing this YouTube channel about my journey, and she encouraged me to keep doing this, to share my story so that it can help educate other people, other patients that might be going through similar. And I thought that was really encouraging. It just felt like a great experience. I felt like I was sitting there with a friend that I didn't know that I needed, and it was just great. It was a great experience. So I'm really grateful for that. What else? Did I hit everything? Oh, something else. If you have genetic test results, something that Dr. Jerath mentioned that was really helpful for her was the descriptions. If you have variants of unknown significance and your genetic test result papers show a little informational blurb about this variance of unknown significance has been associated with these conditions, and it tells you more information, I would suggest bringing that, because she found that really helpful, and doctors might benefit from that extra knowledge. Yeah, I think that was all of the big stuff. If you have any questions, specifically, I will encourage you here to ask those in the comments below. I'll put a link to Dr. Jerath's website, her profile page on the AdventHealth page if you want to check her out. I'll also see if I can find that Medscape link. But yeah, and if you want to learn more about FND and muscle weakness in patients with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I will include that link here. There's another link, and I can't remember. I'm going to go back and listen to the beginning of this recording, and I will make sure I include that link that I mentioned at the beginning. But thank you for listening, you guys, and I hope you're having a great week. I'm super excited about what's ahead and about experimenting with this potassium to see if it'll help, and just a really encouraging, great day overall. So I hope you are having the same. I hope you feel encouraged, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.